From Immersive Labs, this is Cyber Humanity. Hello again, I'm your host Chris Pace. Cyber Humanity is the podcast taking cyber security personally, trying to get inside the heads of hackers, as well as putting our feet in the shoes of defenders. These podcasts essentially come in two flavours, either us ranting about themes close to the hearts of security types, or us chatting about threat and security stuff from recent weeks, and this episode is one of those. As always, I'm joined by my very own elite threat actor group, Kev Breen, Paul Bentham, and Max Vetter.
Hello.
Hello.
Everyone said their name at the right time, which is important. It's part of the intro. Otherwise, the whole episode gets ruined. Kev.
Yes, thank you.
So we are going to start somewhat uncomfortably in the world of cybersecurity certifications and training.
Oh, no, no, I'm not. This is not a good idea.
There's already been some discussion around whether we should even talk about this. In my episode notes, and we share a doc between us at the beginning of each episode, and at the top of it, it says, gently, gently.
That's from General Counsel.
So this could really go anywhere. Full disclosure, of course, Immersive Labs are a vendor of a platform that provides cyber skills. That's part of what we offer. So we are going to tread carefully around this, but I think we do have to talk about it. First,
I love this intro though. Like literally, we're about 4 hours into this podcast, and nobody even knows what we're talking about yet. We're not talking about it. We haven't even talked about it.
Is it significant? Have I hyper caveated it?
I think it's so bad. People are just going to be like, well, "What is he going on about?"
We'll go gently, and then there's Paul.
Yeah,
hang on,
Paul. Maybe you can tell us. Maybe you can tell us what's gone on.
What? Why have I got the hospital pass?
because you were implying that I wasn't getting to the point.
Well, okay, I will get to the point. So, companies that do similar but not the same things as us in the form of SANS and sort of a Crest NCC group combo have been compromised this week or recently. And we don't want to seem like we're pointing any blame or fingers because it could be a competitor, but they're not really. So we're just being very careful.
So we're going to start off by saying a lot. But this could happen to anyone.
Allegedly,
and we're not saying that there have been failings on anyone's part or anything like that.
No failings.
Actually, especially in the case of the SANS one, because the SANS one was a. So there's a couple of things here. The first thing is I think they've done a good job of letting us know what actually happened, so that's good, and I'll let Kev talk about that in a sec. They've been quite explicit about what's actually happened, and I think the other thing is obviously that they should have some of the best incident responders in the game on the job, because most of them teach SANS courses. But Kev, what exactly has gone on with SANS? It seems like a big number, 28,000 individual records, I think they've said it is.
So this is a straight-up social engineering attack. There's SANS themselves haven't been compromised. None of their infrastructure has been compromised. Like I said, they've done a really good job of keeping us informed. What actually happened is they were targeted in a broader campaign that's looking at gaining access to Office 365 accounts, which is what happened here. And it's done through something called consent phishing. And this is a specific attack against things like Office 365, which is using OAuth. The idea being that you trick somebody into installing a malicious plugin or OAuth app into your account, and then that gives them access to all of your emails. And then what happened then is somebody added a forwarding rule, so that all the emails that were incoming to that account were then forwarded out of that account. So it's not like there was a big database compromise. It's not like their infrastructure was compromised. It was a single email account that was compromised.
And we're assuming that some kind of event logging or analysis of that email activity revealed that those emails were being forwarded.
Yeah, Office 365 has lots of login capabilities, and you can see if it's all configured properly, you get a lot of rich data about access, about accounts that are plugged in, about OAuth, where those access is coming from. So if it's like an unknown browser, if it's an unknown IP address, you still get those kind of notifications. So we still don't know exactly how they noticed, whether they were informed by somebody, but they're giving plenty of information. Like you said, they've got the right people available to them to be able to find out exactly what happened.
I do like this. It's as an attack vector. So just keeping out who was compromised for a minute. That kind of consent. Would you call it consent attack?
Consent phishing.
Consent phishing. There's no, because you can have all the two-factor authentication you want on your account, but when you're logged into your account, you could consent to some other app through OAuth, which is this kind of, it's effectively lets you do single sign-on with other providers, and it's a clever thing to do because it is more secure, because then your identity protection is through your Office 365 account, and then you're using that identity, you're brokering that identity to other services, but of course, there's no protection on that bit, and I've had this type of thing come in not as a phishing attack, but as just like a new service that we use as like signed up. Hey, click here to like authorize this service with your Google account in our particular instance. And you think, whoa, I'm giving it access to all of my emails, my identity, etc., etc. It does feel like a bit of a soft underbelly of some of the identity and infrastructure, identity and access management stuff that we use and rely on.
It's become commonplace as well. Like you said, OAuth login is pretty much everywhere these days. So anytime you go to a website, it says sign in with Facebook, sign in with Google. And if you're using something like Google or Office 365, then you could open yourselves up. Now, they do give a nice big pop-up that says these are the permissions that are available, but honestly, how many people actually read those? How many people pay attention to or understand what that kind of access actually means?
So I think in this particular instance with SANS, like you can sort of, this is quite a new type of phishing attack, and pretty sophisticated, I'd say, compared to each standard, like, hey, you've got $4 million waiting in a Nigerian bank, just give us your bank details to get it.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of it. Like on the surface, it's not that difficult to set up. If you're trying to like fish for Google stuff, I could create a free Gmail account. I can set up OAuth, and then you can share those details, and you can build that yourself. It's the weaponizing it and using it that makes it a bit harder, and then tricking people into going to actually handing over the details.
But you could easily make it part of another attack, right? Is if Paul emailed me saying you need to install this on your system that's linked to Slack or linked to anything else, then I'll just go, yeah, okay, install. So you could probably package it in with a more advanced attack to get that.
Yeah, this is social engineering all the way. There's several social engineering. You're going to have to trick a user into thinking it's a service they want to access.
Yeah, but it's pretty. But the thing is with OAuth, there's so many new SaaS products. I mean, even we are not a massive company, and we have quite a lot. I think with all this move to remote working, people are going to switch to tools that enable more remote working. That gives you so many services that you're just being signed up for. Hey, like your colleague has shared you this thing in this document sharing solution. Click here to log in, and don't worry, it's all super secure because we're going to use your standard login. And what's kind of clever, the attack vector is pretty cool, but then the exploit that they used was just a really basic forward all emails, auto forwarding rule.
Yeah,
and that's probably the one kind of flaw in the way that SANS had configured their Office 365 account here, because I think it is possible to default to blocking that as a default setting in there, because in what possible work-related scenario would you auto-forward all your email out? So I think it wasn't their resolution to this just to simply turn off all auto-forwarding.
Yeah, and Microsoft have, to Microsoft's credit specifically with the Office 365 ones, Microsoft have seen this and they've taken actions on their own side to try and identify these. And we know that Microsoft are really, really good at taking legal action for typo squatting and phishing domains that are stealing their logos, their designs, they're super hot on going straight after them and just doing takedowns. So
it could be quite hard as well, because I know Sans, they might employ lots of contractors, right? So they're not full employees, but they'll still have access to, a lot of training companies do that. So, it's harder to then enforce Office 365 rules on lots of people who might not be full employees of the company as well.
Yeah, the old usability versus security debate.
Exactly.
Well, I think we did very well there, boys. Like, we didn't. I don't think we're
Chris
going to get
stayed
sued for that bit.
Well, you say that.
no.
Well, you say that. I only had, so before we move on to NCC and Crest, I just had one tiny thing about this that has bugged me. And as always with me, it feels like it's come down to the cons around the incident. So there was an article published in the Register, in the usual kind of registery sort of way. It had a bit of a jokey headline, but the reporting was fair and accurate. And they were asking questions about, what data had been harvested and all this kind of stuff. Well, Sans responded to that article by kind of giving more information about who the PII belonged to, and they said, and I'll read it I'll read it and let people infer for themselves where they think my issue might be here. The compromised PII consisted of information on individuals who had recently registered for our virtual DFIR summit and was intended for community outreach purposes. So this meant the data consisted of first name, last name, email, work phone, company name, work address, and country of residence. Information that is largely available in publicly available databases. No customer records, no instructor records, or other parties were impacted. Now, I'm not going to have my rant. I'm going to ask you guys why you think that might have bothered me.
He's setting us up. He's setting us up. Don't do it.
It's that middle sentence, isn't it?
Oh, it's that last one, yeah. Information is largely available in publicly available databases. That's the thing that that's them trying to protect themselves a little bit, and that feels.
I think you get 4 out of 5 for that, Kev. I think the real money shot here is that Chris is a little bit disappointed, potentially, that Sans may have considered its customers' data to be more important than the personal data for people registering for a course, and he may be slightly disappointed that Sans would have said that in some comms.
There we go. So that's great. I think we've covered that. I think we've done brilliantly there. You've all put words in my mouth without me having to say them, and those words didn't really even belong to you. So great, even better. I think we're all sewn up there legally. But now we're going to move on and talk about another training provider of certifications, Crest and NCC Group. And basically, this is slightly more interesting in that what has happened is there was an internal GitHub, or a GitHub that was meant for trainers, that had training material on it, that seemed to have information about how to pass Crest certifications, that has essentially been breached.
A little
Have I got
bit.
that right?
So I don't.
That's done with fake praise, Chris. That's Kev's fault. No, Chris, that was completely wrong.
Can I just stop
It's
you there?
not completely wrong. We don't know who went to GitHub account. It doesn't look like it was actually an NCC-owned account. The NCC have confirmed that, yes, the data was theirs, but the account was set up like last month, so that I don't think it was actually an NCC account, because there's years worth of stuff in there. So I think it's somebody who's had access to it from inside NCC, who have then published it to their own GitHub, and then it's gone from there. I don't think it was, whilst it was NCC's data, I don't think they were the owner of the GitHub account. That's
understood. But the point being that the information that was there would seem to be material that shows people how to pass the exam, or that contains the answers.
Yes, it does seem that there's a couple of things in here. I think Crest pulled out 3 points. There is like step by step for old CRT exams. So the old exam, like
Crest registered trainer, that is.
Practically a step by step. This is how you complete this exam. Whether they were available at the time of the exams, we don't know. And then there are some very deliberate documents and pieces of work that are, like you said, they're aimed at teaching you like how to pass the exam rather than preparing you for what might be in the exam.
Yeah, like the exact, in a multiple choice question bit, it's just got all the questions and the answer you need to fill in, which is not so much about learning.
Is this a bit like past papers when you're at school or at uni?
Yeah.
Oh,
yes,
nice.
except these past papers may also have been live papers at the time they were originally shared internally at NCC, which would put them in breach of Crest's NDA.
So NCC want their staff to get Crest.
Well, some of them they might have to be as well, because if they're working under certain government contracts, you have to be Crest registered, which leads us to more interesting questions.
So NCC are helping its own people pass the test by giving them past papers.
That's what
may or may not be live to help them pass.
They're teaching them how to take the Crest exam rather than teaching them the skills they need to pass the exam.
Wow, we could get in a whole debate about education, because isn't really the whole education system set up to teach you how to pass exams rather than teach you how to know stuff? Not Crest, any education.
This then takes us naturally to the key question, which is how, when we've talked about this before, like does a certification indicate aptitude, and how can those kinds of certifications do that? I mean, how do you go about ensuring that when someone takes, you'd think with all the technology available there would be a way, but how do you ensure that when someone is going through the taking of an exam or undertaking a certification, that they are demonstrating aptitude rather than just going through?
What we at Immersive love about people like Crest and like OSCP is the practical nature of the exams, in that it makes you do things that you might need to do in the real world, and therefore we consider it a much better way of kind of evidencing your knowledge that you've gained, and so that is a problem. Yeah, not just for Crest. OSCP had this problem as well, where some of the exams were leaked.
All of the exams were leaked. Yeah, so last year, Offensive Security, who run the OSCP course, it was reasonably well known that you could pay somebody in India to basically sit your exam for you. And there were lots of people who would make use of this service that was available. And somebody, and I can't remember exactly if we knew who it was, became incredibly frustrated with the fact that this was a thing. So what he did is he went to OSCP, who hadn't changed their exams in like 5 or 6 years, and said, I'm going to publish all the solutions for every exam unless you change them, because I'm sick and tired of people just like buying the papers or paying something to do it. And he actually followed through on that. He actually published all of the details for all of their live exams, which then OSCP took 2 courses of action, which I kind of like, and one which I'm not a massive fan of. The first one is they rebuilt all their exams, published new ones, so that was great, and they did that very quickly. The second one, so OSCP is an online 48-hour exam, 24-hour practical, 24 hours to write the report. I've done it. It's brutal. And what they're doing now is it's moderated.
Did you actually do it, or did you get somebody in India to do it for you?
Brutal pain for that.
Like my wife can attest to the many late nights studying.
I'm not sure that she's an independent witness.
He's going to tell you how they get independent witnesses now.
You have to live stream, so you have a webcam on, and whilst you're sat there doing your exam, I don't know if it's actively monitored or just recorded for screening purposes, but you have to have your webcam on.
I'm pretty sure it's actively
like a Twitch stream.
Effectively,
the most boring Twitch screen. I'm pretty sure it is monitored.
Yeah, so you have to take breaks, which for me would be the incredibly difficult part. So, like I said, it's a 24-hour exam, and I had no sleeping schedule during that 24 hours, and I was there for pretty much all of it, like right up to the wire. And I'd grab like a couple of hours of sleep and come back at like 2 a.m, do another 20 minutes, set some scans running, go and get some sleep, come back. So, yeah, it's not fun, and it's super stressful because it's so tightly constrained with time. like the thought of having somebody monitoring me, like early hours in the morning, like have I remembered to put my pants on when I came back from bed? If I stand up and walk away,
Big Brother.
well, yeah, it does have that kind of feel to it, but I love OSCP. It's a very difficult course. It's a very difficult exam. And if you're doing it properly, it shows that you've got those skills because it is such a practical thing. So on one hand, I kind of like the fact that they're tightening the stuff behind it.
Yeah, and clearly, the reason for the backlash is because of what you just described. If some people are, giving their all to pass that exam, and then that's being like flagrantly disregarded by others, then clearly something will have to be done. I think in the case of the Crest thing, I suppose there seems to be a willingness to potentially game the system to get as many people certified as possible, and that obviously raises questions. That not only does that not help those providing the training, it doesn't help those providing the certifications either.
I've heard of other instructors when I was an instructor teaching things like certified ethical hacker as well. I heard that other instructors basically just gave answers to the exam at the end, and so and you see all over the internet, it's like guarantee pass. It's like, well, if it's guaranteed pass, what is the value in that certification?
I did an IBM course, and the instructor he'd flown over from America, and he it was when he said, every time you see me do a little tap dance, that's a question that's going to be on the exam. And like through the entire 3-day course, you just see him
Tap
like
dance the whole 3 days, did he?
something would come up when the slides would come up, and he'd just do this little dance, and then you'd see everybody like furiously writing that down, and then just like zone out until he tap danced again.
I don't really understand why anybody bothers with all this though, because can't you just buy a master's in cybersecurity? Yeah, that's it.
That's the see previous rant.
Yeah, see previous rant.
Interesting. So NCC Group are heavily embedded with Crest as one of the founders. So NCC, Mark Turner, who's the Crest GB chair, has recused himself from the entire investigation pending its outcome.
I've only ever heard the word recuse myself in American legal dramas.
Something to do with Trump.
Yeah.
Season
Your
3 of
favourite.
Season 3 of The Good Wife. There's loads of recusing all over the place.
Did we cover that adequately? I don't really feel like we got into trouble there
I
at
think
all.
we did.
So
yeah.
No,
well
I think-
done, everybody. Strong
No,
game.
Pretty good.
Strong.
Good work. Okay, let's move on to something completely different, and that is the use of facial recognition by law enforcement. So in the UK this week, Liberty, the human rights group, are celebrating after the Court of Appeal ruled that the use of facial recognition, or AFR, I'm not sure why it's AFR. Oh, automatic maybe. Automated? Yeah, maybe. By the South Wales Police, in this case, was unlawful, although the force has said that they may not stop future pilots of this technology. And the case was brought by Liberty when an activist discovered that their image had been captured twice in 2017 and 2018 as police trawled through crowds to match images with suspect headshots in their database, which to me just sounds like the kind of thing that would happen in Spooks, like in the mid-2000s, and we thought it was science fiction. But it turns out they can actually do this stuff, and that is, according to the Court of Appeal, is a problem and is not going to be allowed to happen anymore.
What? This is ridiculous. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that.
I don't see any problem with it.
So there are questions that come from your question. Are you saying what's wrong with somebody not being happy about their image being captured? Are you saying what's wrong with the police doing it? Are you saying, what are you saying?
I just didn't even understand why this is a story. Why are we even talking about this on the podcast? This is like cyber humanity. Like, there are CCTV cameras. We perform some analytics on those cameras and make sure that people are keep safe. Well, I don't see there's no problem here.
The middle part that you sort of glossed over, that like heavily involves systems and technology, and it's doing is taking my image and what you describe as doing some analysis. Do you want to try and dig a little bit deeper into what we might mean by doing some analysis?
Well, look, the clue is in the title. It's automated facial recognition. So it's looking at pictures in the CCTV feeds and trying to match them to people that they know. That seems
Right.
pretty,
And
pretty important to me.
how is it doing that matching?
Automatically.
Great.
And machine learning. Machine learning is going to be a thing here.
AI. Okay, so now some of us already are thinking, oh, I'm going to have to tread water for a little bit here. The machine learning has been mentioned.
The actual issue with this, and the reason why it's a breach of the European Convention on Human Rights, is that it doesn't adequately prevent for discrimination based on gender or ethnic grounds. That's its problem, that the facial recognition technology isn't good enough.
Yes.
I can see you all eye-rolling at me for defending this, but...
I'm defending it.
Thanks, Kev.
I'm on your side.
You just quietly... You've tuned out. I'll leave Paul to this. I'll throw him to
I
the
had
wolves.
loads to say, but Paul is...
The thing about this is, I have put a CCTV camera up, right? It's up there outside the Millennium Stadium, which is presumably where most of this stuff... nothing else happens in South Wales, right? So I've got these cameras up.
Oh, dear.
Everybody, Max is Welsh. That's the nobody would know because nobody would know because he hasn't got a Welsh accent, but he drinks. He drinks
I'm from
well.
Cardiff.
That's in the English part of Wales. Oh dear, I'm going to get hate mail.
Yeah.
I've put a CCTV camera up outside my little stadium and I'm pointing it at people. And the whole point of those CCTV cameras is to make sure that like law and order is like protected, that criminality is recorded. And I'm storing all those images in real time on hard drives, right? Why are we doing that? We're doing that in order to understand what's going on in those images. So why is it wrong to put in some extra technology that looks at that data that's already been stored and then uses that to give the law enforcement members of the South Wales Police a data point on whether or not there is a potential criminal actor in that crowd there potentially to cause trouble?
Yeah, because there's a lot of non-criminal actors, though, right, in that crowd. That's the
point.
But
my point is, we've already crossed that Rubicon. We've already put the camera up and recorded the data. Now I'm doing something with the data.
No, but that's much more powerful, right?
Can you imagine that, Craig? If there was something happened and the police force turned around and said, we had the CCTV footage, we saw that he was coming, and we did nothing with it.
If I've got a list of pictures of potential terrorists, you look at what happened in Manchester, you look at what happened in London on the bridge, if you've got terrorists that have been identified and you're not processing that data in real time, then what's the point of having those cameras? Oh, look, after the event, we could see that the bad actor was wearing a vest and coming into the stadium.
The reason that the judgment was upheld was because the court agreed that there were, first of all, fundamental deficiencies in the legal framework, and so therefore rights were breached. But the ruling also stated that the fact remains that the South Wales Police had never sought to satisfy themselves, either directly or independently, that the software did not have an unacceptable bias in terms of how it worked on any grounds. In this case, they're talking about grounds of race or gender. But actually, this goes back to, like, this is not just to do with this ruling. This is to do with the widely accepted and mostly agreed upon view that facial recognition is appalling when it comes to particularly racial bias. It's just not very good. And so it's okay for you to say a bit of processing on some video, but that doesn't deal with the fundamental problem, which is it is not fit for purpose. What you describe, it cannot do. And until it can, in my view, it shouldn't be being used in this way.
But how can you build it? If you can only get better by testing it and building it.
I don't think there's anything wrong with testing it, and I think if a police force was telling us that they were testing, I think one of the challenges here as well is that they hadn't made clear to people who were captured by the system that it was being tested.
Hey, hang on, I think you've gone. But the problem with the point you're making, Chris, is that I'm not putting a machine gun on top of that CCTV camera and mowing down people that the camera identifies as a bad actor. It's not like there's a a camera and an effect straight afterwards. These people aren't getting arrested. They're not getting machine gunned. It's not like some sort of dystopian future. It's a data point, and it says, hey, law enforcement, there is a potentially bad actor in that crowd. You might want to consider whether or not that person is the bad actor we think they might be or not.
I think it's quite clear if this technology would stop those terrorists on the bridge or whatever, I don't think any of us would be in disagreement with that happening. I think it's always easy to say, well, what if it does this thing? But it doesn't, right? It didn't stop those terrorists. And police have had facial recognition, and we've got more CCTV cameras in this country than any other country in the world. And it's kind of like you can't just link the two, because where do you stop? You know, is it just the terrorists, or is it the Black Lives Matter, or is it when does this facial recognition go too far? And being an ex-police officer, obviously I want to stop any crime that's going on, and I think CCTV can be a really good tool, but you've got to balance that with the European Court of Human Rights.
Yeah, but my issue with this, right, I can hear where you're going, but my issue with this is that the headline is facial recognition is bad. Right. The premise of where you've gone with that is that CCTV cameras are bad.
No, that we never said that.
Well, then why I don't understand what's wrong with the processing of that data.
The processing of that data, it's nothing wrong with even the processing of that data. The processing of that data poorly is my biggest.
If it's got a load of false positives, then there's still no problem with that. It's just a data point. It's better than the police officers just having to look through it all manually. Like, would you rather there be thousands of police officers doing it like themselves?
No one's going to disagree with you about you have to use video evidence for the purposes of convicting people of crimes. No one's going to disagree with that. The challenge here is that a technology has been used clearly before it was ready, and B, that I'm just going to come out and say it, was probably built by a load of white tech bros in San Francisco, and it doesn't work properly.
I still come back to the point that we need this technology to work. It's going to save lives. We're not just talking about terrorists. Like, if children go missing, like being able to actively track them through busy city streets by using this kind of technology. But you can only get this technology to a point where you can use it by actively building it, by putting it in place and using it. And yes, it might have a high false positive rate, but that's not the technology. It's the police officer who goes and reviews that, like Paul said. Like, it just tells you this has happened. There's no immediate effect from it. So we need better training for the people who are monitoring and using these systems. Teach them, get them to remove their biases rather than like trusting the machine.
So I suppose the point of talking about the article is: do we think this will stop the rollout of facial recognition within CCTV, or do we think this is, this ruling would do anything, or is just a blip in the development of it?
The legal teams will find a way around.
Yeah, I think that probably will happen. But I think the other thing is that when this is not unique to the UK, there are much bigger conversations being had across the Atlantic, particularly in the wake of Black Lives Matter and the, how you want to define civil unrest that came out of that. There are questions being asked of law enforcement about how facial recognition technology is being used, and there is a feeling, amongst a certain parts of the population that information is not being shared. There are already questions being asked about how NYPD use facial recognition, and the argument is the NYPD aren't answering those questions. So I think it's a much bigger thing than just this. The genesis of machine learning and the methodology that's applied to actually get to what Paul describes as a data point is actually kind of fundamentally broken if it's going to try and do what this is trying to make it do. So I think there's bigger conversations to be had about how we get data, because what Kev is saying is we need to have the data in order for the systems to be able to work properly. We do, but when that data point is someone's face or what one might call personally identifiable information, then that creates a problem, doesn't it?
I think we've already established that pictures aren't PII.
It's common knowledge. Common knowledge. Well, we came to no conclusions there.
That's good.
But it was a good one. That was a good one.
Yeah.
That was a good one. Anyway, that brings us to a close. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do subscribe, rate and comment wherever you get your audio content. And if you want to know more about Immersive Labs, you can find us at immersivelabs.com or follow us on Twitter at Immersive Labs UK. Until next time, from all of us, goodbye.
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 Goodbye.